Place a marble inside, hold the base, and if you hold the blades, it doesn't make a good sound. It sounds better if you hold the board. Hold it here and spin it, and it will make a sound. It will probably sound better once the glue dries, but for now, it's complete. Hello everyone. I will now explain how to make a circular wooden xylophone. Please watch and make it along with me. Thank you. This is the finished sample. This is what we'll be making. Now, let's go ahead and explain the process. Okay. First, we'll start from step 1. Draw lines on the board with a cutter knife to prepare for cutting. First, lay out the 8 boards you have. I believe there are 8 boards. At this point, we won't cut the longest one. We decided not to cut the longest one. We're not cutting this one now. We will reduce the length of each subsequent board by 1 centimeter, then 2 centimeters, and so on, marking them accordingly. This line will be 7 centimeters shorter from here. So, lay them out like this and decide if the current order is fine, or if you want to rearrange them. This side will be discarded, so think carefully about which one you don't need and which is better. We will now mark them in order. The front one will remain as is, so it doesn't need a mark. The next one will be 1 centimeter. To start, the first cut is 1 centimeter. You will probably use a ruler like this. Mark 1 centimeter from both ends. Let's do that. Make a 1 centimeter mark on both ends of the board. Draw a line. Next is 2 centimeters. Continue marking lines in this order. 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters, and so on. Once you've marked everything, lay them out again to ensure no mistakes. If everything looks good, draw the same lines on the back side. Maybe we should measure again. Again, 1 centimeter lines will be 1 centimeter. Draw lines on both sides, front and back. Now, we've marked the cutting lines on both the front and back sides. Next, we will use a cutter knife to cut along these lines. If you have a cutting mat at home, use it. If not, use an old magazine or newspaper to protect your table. Let's make sure not to damage the table with the cutter knife. Be careful not to scratch the table with the cutter knife. Cutter knives come in various sizes, but any size will do. Let's try it with this one. Extend the blade, and if you're right-handed, hold the piece steady with your left hand, and hold the cutter knife like a pencil. At first, gently applying without much pressure, lightly trace over the pencil line. Stay calm. If you make a mistake here, it will cause trouble later. We've done it once, but let's cut about 2 more times for a total of 3 cuts. little by little. After cutting about 3 times, flip it over and cut 3 more times. Again, start gently and increase pressure gradually. On the second pass, apply more pressure than before. And then, 1 more time. It may still be attached even after cutting 3 times on both sides. But if you do this, it should tear off. If it still doesn't cut through, do another pass or 2 on both sides. Continue doing it until you can remove it with a bit of effort, like this. Don't force it too much if it doesn't move, otherwise, it might break or fall apart. So, do it a few times like this. Let's do another one now, just like before, following the same order. Start gently, and then increase pressure gradually. How's that? Okay, it looks good. Something like this. Now, cut along all the lines for the remaining pieces. All right, then. Everyone has cut their pieces, so we have 8 boards, each one shorter by 1 centimeter in order. Now, the next step is to sand the cut edges with sandpaper. We will use sandpaper to smooth it out. What should we do? When sanding with sandpaper, a lot of fine dust comes out. So, to prevent it from getting messy, place some newspaper underneath. If you're worried about the dust, wear a mask. First, let's sand the edges we just cut. For those who didn't cut very well, there are 2 types of sandpaper, 120 grit and 240 grit. If your cut is very rough and uneven, start with 120 grit. 120 grit is coarser, so it will sand down more material. Let's fix it up. If it's quite uneven, try to correct it. There are different ways to sand. You can wrap it around a sanding block, like this, and sand like this. Sand in this manner to make it flat. This way, you can make it flat. Alternatively, you can place the sandpaper down and rub the wood against it like this. Which one is easier, I wonder? Either way is fine, and maybe this way is easier. Next, if the surface is a little rough, or if you want a smoother finish, use the 240 grit sandpaper. We use the fine 240 grit sandpaper to make it smooth. When sanding flat surfaces, wrap the sandpaper around a sanding block like this, and hold it firmly. Hold it like this, and then smooth the surface like this if you're finishing. Also, if there are any burrs or rough edges here, by sanding at this angle, you can round off the corners, giving them a softer appearance like this. Something like this. And if you want to slightly round off these corners, you can do it at this stage. Let's do that now. These corners are here. Alright, with this, the board part is now finished. It's complete for now. Next, we will move on to the base part. We will now make the base part. Let's put the sandpaper away for now. There are already markings for the cuts, so we'll cut along these grooves with a saw. We'll cut through these grooves with a saw. There are various types of saws, and I'm not sure if the one you have at home is the same as this one. But for saws with teeth on both sides, the shape of the teeth is different on each side. For the cuts we're making now, the side with the finer teeth, not the large triangular teeth, that is used for rip cutting, which means cutting along the grain of the wood. Cutting perpendicular to the grain is called cross-cutting, but this is at a 45-degree angle, so either way is fine. But I think the finer teeth will work better, so let's try cutting with the finer toothed side. Position the piece slightly off the edge of the table, and align the saw in the groove, then cut straight down. As you finish cutting, be gentle. Don't cut too forcefully, or you might injure your foot. This is how the cut looks now. I've made one cut so far. I will cut the remaining 3 sections in the same way. Now, the shape has changed from a square to an octagon. This is where the cuts were made. So, there may still be some steps or rough spots here. First, we'll finish off the parts we just cut using sandpaper. Let's sand the freshly cut areas until they're smooth. If there are any rough spots in areas that haven't been cut, we'll sand those now as well. This is quite rough. In such cases, when there are steps or rough areas, start with 120 grit sandpaper, just like before. As before, you can either sand like this, or like this. Choose whichever method is easier for you. Try using the method that works best for you. Once it's reasonably smooth, switch to 240 grit sandpaper and lightly finish the entire surface. Sand it down and slightly round the edges. This will make it feel gentler when held. First, sand the flat areas on the top and bottom. The wood grain, or the growth rings, are running in this direction. When sanding, align the sandpaper with the direction of the grain for a better finish. Sanding perpendicular to the grain may not give as good a result. Let's sand in the direction of the grain. Move the sandpaper in the direction of the grain. After sanding the top and bottom, let's move on to sanding these areas slightly as well. Like this. For the rounding I mentioned earlier, sand at an angle of about 45 degrees. Since I've sanded the upper part, now I'll also work on the bottom edges. With this, I've managed to round the edges a bit. If you want to round the edges more, you can do so over a longer period. Decide how much you want based on your preference. Adjust to your liking. Now, we'll move on to assembling the parts. We'll fit this board into the groove, since there might be tight or loose spots. Adjust as needed. For any tight spots, sand the board slightly. If you force it in, it might not fit well. So decide where each piece will go at this stage. Decide which piece goes where. For instance, you can insert the boards from shortest to longest, or you can insert them in order from the longest to the second longest, third, fourth, and so on. In this case, the longest board goes here, and then the first, second, third, and fourth. You can arrange them as you like, in order or any other way. Decide what looks best to you. I will try to assemble the parts in sequence with 2 pieces. This is the shortest one now. I'll also decide on its position. Mark the place for the shortest one. Next, place the second one right next to it. Do it in order like this. It's a bit tight right now. It won't fit. In such cases, sand it a bit. Instead of sanding the whole piece, sand the tip a little to make it slightly tapered. Rather than making the entire piece thinner, try shaping it slightly to fit. Check the fit occasionally. It's starting to fit better now. If it's too loose, the glue might not hold well. So aim for a fit where you need to push it in slightly. The right tightness can be tricky. Too loose is too soft. If it won't fit, it's too tight, so aim for a slight fit. It should stand like this. This level of fit is best. This one is also a bit tight. The third one is also a bit tight. I'll sand it a bit. Adjust gradually by sanding a bit at a time. If you sand too much at once, it might become too loose. Okay, that should be fine. Now that the fit is almost right, I'll apply wood glue to secure everything. This is the final assembly step. We're now applying glue to hold it all together. This is the temporary assembly. Let's clear this up. I've done a temporary assembly. Now, remove the parts and start with the shortest one. For the assembly, I'll use wood glue. Remove this as well. Apply a small amount of wood glue into the groove. Don't apply too much. Just like this. Is this too much? Can you tell? Apply it like this, a little bit. Insert this. Gently tap it. Next. Ideally, it works better this way, like this. Something like this. The glue has come out quite a bit. If glue has come out, it means that the glue has reached deep inside. This will become transparent when it dries. But if too much comes out, it doesn't look good. So let's wipe it a bit. To wipe it, use a slightly wrung-out damp cloth. And wipe like this. If it's hard to wipe in the small areas, you can use an old toothbrush, slightly damp, to scoop and wipe the glue cleanly. This way, the glue can be removed quite cleanly. I think it looks better if this is straight. So check visually and adjust to make it straight, like this. You can align it visually. Or if you're a carpenter, You can use a square tool to check if it's straight. Place it like this and check if it's straight. If you don't have such a tool at home, you can use a ruler or even a book. Try using a book like this and check if these lines align. If they don't, it means it's not a right angle, so adjust it until it's straight. If it's not quite right, you can adjust it a bit more. Try doing it like this. If you think this is okay, then that's fine. Now, on to the second part. Do it in this order. Yes, with this, we've completed the shape from the long piece in this order. It's best to leave the glue undisturbed for about 1 or 2 hours to dry as much as possible. Please try it after the glue has dried to some extent. For now, I'll try it out. Place a marble inside, hold the base, and if you hold the blades, it doesn't make a good sound. It sounds better if you hold the board. Hold it here and spin it, and it will make a sound. It will probably sound better once the glue dries, but for now, it's complete. Alright, that's all. Please be careful not to get injured while doing it. Thank you very much.